You're listening to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
And with that, the man, the myth, the legend, Bob Dennis is going to come up and be our first podcast. He's got a couple of podcasts under his belt. One of those is Urban Legends and Stranger Truths, where he talks a little bit about everything that goes bump in the night. And he also does a podcast, Mob and Mafia News, covering modern mafia, organized crime news that happens in today. Bob has been an integral part of the APC thus far. So without further ado, Bob Dennis.
Hello, thank you. David and Eric, hi, right there, are the two who started the organization, and I would like to thank them for having this here tonight. And the other folks are all going to be doing podcasts themselves that you'll be able to listen to. I'm just going to do a little bit of talking tonight, and hopefully not too much. But the first thing I would like to do is ask a question, and that is of you people who are attending, what is it that you're hoping to get out of tonight? And you can just speak up. This is like being at home. You can say anything you want. You, sir, you have your hands together like you're praying.
I came to listen to Gary and Bobby and Allison.
Excellent.
Interested to hear all the other podcasts.
Gary, absolutely the most successful podcaster in our group. That's why we don't like him anymore. Yeah, he's back there. The thing is, look the other way, right, Gary? He can be just like unnoticeable if he's in a room, and yet absolutely fascinating. Anybody in the back have any questions or thoughts about what you would like tonight out of our get-together? Real low expectations, great. I'm good with that. I am excellent with that. All right, so I actually have 3 podcasts, and there are people who will tell you that you shouldn't have more than one, and that can be true. If you're starting out, you don't want to overwhelm yourself. But I had a background in broadcasting, so I was familiar with it, comfortable with it, and able to do it. I did the Urban Legends and Stranger Truths. Don't ask me why I use that name. That's something you might want to remember when you name your podcasts, if you're going to be doing them, is to have something that's easily identifiable. And one with a lot of words like that is kind of strange. Now, that having been said, so far, Urban Legends and Stranger Truths, nothing in comparison to Gary, who is the most successful, but has had about 1.5 million listens. So I'm very proud of that. And then my second podcast, thank you, the second one that I started was Mob and Mafia News. And because of the job that I have, I don't like doing things where I have a high recognition ability on some things, especially with modern mafia, because this is talking about people who are out there now who are doing real crimes. You're talking about everything from traditional mafia on through drug cartels and syndicates and organizations that are out doing illegal and illicit things. It's fascinating because it is still worldwide. It is something that is still very much part of our world. But when I did it, also, I'm just telling you the mistakes that I made. I did it, and I was just goofing around when I started out. And so I changed and used a different name than mine because I didn't want to get a hit job on me by somebody, right? And so I changed my name on the program to Archer Davis. I thought that sounded like a good name, didn't it? And I thought, okay, well, I could come up with a different sounding voice too. So instead of just being Bob Dennis doing Mob and Mafia News, I did Mob and Mafia News, Archer Davis reporting. I did it as a joke, and people loved it. And I was like, oh my God, now I'm stuck with this. It's like Frankenstein. So when you do something, kind of think about it before you actually set it up and do it, because otherwise you may end up being stuck with it for a while. And although I have to say it's been fun. Now, the podcast that I do is on a very small host called Swell, or Swellcast if you prefer. And it allows audio feedback from people who listen, which is also fun. I enjoy that. I did mine not so much from the standpoint that I wanted to start a podcast and make money at it. I'm really good at that, not making money at it. But I did it because I just wanted to do research. I wanted to learn something about podcasting. Even though I had a broadcasting background, there were a lot of things about podcasting I had no clue about. And I was somewhat not intimidated, but mystified because I had been out of the business for so long. And it turns out it is actually fairly easy. It's actually something that anybody can do. I started out with my iPad, my iPhone, and a microphone. And, plug the microphone into the telephone, into the cell phone, and then get my script on my iPad, and away I went. And I enjoyed it. The very first one was on October 31st of 2022, which is Halloween, and I did it about Harry Houdini, because that's the day he died. Not that exact day, he died in like 1926, I want to say. Anyways, so when you put your podcast together, you will be probably doing a lot of research. I don't have to do a tremendous amount of research because all of my podcasts, Urban Legends and Stranger Truths, are unusual stories from today. So when you choose a topic, choose something that you'll be able to work with, that you have information readily available, and something that you feel passionate about. I was a news reporter for 11 years, so I enjoyed doing news. I enjoyed going through things, and to be able to write things for a newscast was just second nature. And so always to have something available to you for copy to be able to have your show. That was for, and all of mine are basically news-oriented. The first one, like I said, Urban Legends. The second one, which is Mob and Mafia. These are all old Mob and Mafia guys. And I will point this out. This is Bugsy Siegel here. His birthday is the same as mine. That's very important. You might want to write that down. And Al Capone. And as long as we're in the Prohibition room, I'll tell you something about during the time of Prohibition, Al Capone, who did not have an extensive education. I mean, he basically got out of school when he was in 6th grade because he got in trouble. He beat up a teacher. And he got into it, was a genius with logistics. And so he eventually worked his way through, well, I will keep it short as best I can, which is almost impossible. But one of the things that he came up with was that back during the Prohibition time, they had something called near beer. And near beer was 0.1% of alcohol that was put into barrels. It was legal. You could buy it, sell it, trade it, move it, put it wherever you want. And so whenever the government tried to break him down or catch him, they didn't do very well because everything they had from him was in barrels was near beer. What they did was they brought their barrels in, and you know that little plug you have like in wood chairs where you'll see it. It's a little plug that covers the screw on there. It's called a bung. And the thing that covers the hole on a barrel is called a bung, for a bung hole. What they would do is they took veterinary needles for like giving shots to horses and cows and stuff like that, and they would take a syringe and they filled it with 95 proof alcohol. And then they would stick it in through the bung, which was cork, and they would put the alcohol into the barrel. So when they transported them, they were legal. But when they got them in the warehouse, they were illegal. So they were never caught that way. So for whatever that's worth. Again, you might want to write that down in case you're running illegal liquor. The other thing is I have a third podcast, which is called Cyber News Now, and that's primarily about things that are happening in the cyber universe, not like talking about software and stuff, and I get lost in that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, I bought a book recently because I always felt as though I should know how to do coding and programming. I always thought that was something that really you should know something about. And I bought a book, it was by an author who decided that he was going to try and learn coding. As I read the book, I realized, yeah, I don't need to do that. Things about podcasting that might surprise you is that sometimes you'll be out and about and someone will hear you and they'll go, hey, don't you do that podcast? You do that podcast, right? Yeah, hey, that's really good. And it's fun because you're passionate about it. Podcasting is a fun, passionate kind of thing that is easy to do because you're excited about it and you're glad to be a part of it. And I'm supposed to go for 10 minutes, and I'm sitting here thinking, 2 minutes left?
You can wrap it up if you want.
Preferably around my neck, and then... I'm not going to be singing. You wanted me to sing earlier, but...
You were the one that brought that up.
So anyways, that is basically it, unless you have some questions, which I don't think you do because I haven't said anything really all that interesting. But podcasting is absolutely wonderful. This group of podcasters is a wonderful resource. They are fun, they're funny. We sit up here and have these great, actually intelligent conversations. And it is a fun, conversational kind of thing. David's kind of a bore, but beyond that, no, I'm teasing. David is a wonderful guy.
Someone's got to handle that.
Well, and so if you're interested in being part of the group, that's wonderful. But what I'm trying to say is that there is a tremendous number of resources here. People who can answer your questions, people who have dealt with what you've dealt with, because it can seem to be very overwhelming in the initial phase when you first begin to do it, because you look at it, and we have some members who don't have podcasts, who are just kind of sitting and learning, which is what I did when I initially joined the group. They kept saying, "So Bob, when are you going to have a podcast? You going to do something pretty soon?" It's like, yeah, I'll do something real soon, real quick. And so anyways, it's a great resource, and David is giving me the signal, which is good because you don't want to hear any more from me anyways. So thank you very much.
We appreciate your expertise and your stories. Bob Dennis, everyone. We'll leave his QR code up there for one more second while we transition. So up next is our friends Tracy and Eric Walterkins. Tracy is a neurodivergent. She is living with bipolar, and she started off this podcast just trying to diary the story. And then Eric came in along the way, and I'll let her tell the rest of the story. So they're going to do some reflections on what they've learned along the way so far. So Tracy and Eric, everyone. It's more comfortable.
So, as David said, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Eric.
And our podcast.
And Tracy needs to hold the mic a little bit closer to her mouth.
Yeah. So yeah, our podcast is Stigmas and Open Wounds. And this was my brainchild because it was really for two reasons. One, I wanted to get the word out about the stigmas of mental health and mental illness and kind of debunk a lot of those stigmas. There's a lot of thoughts that people have about mental illness, we can't do things the way other people can and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, we really can. So I wanted to get the word out about that. The other thing was I wanted to get the word out that we can talk about this, and we really should talk about this. And so yeah, that was really it. And I kind of wanted to be like, we need to get talking about mental health more. And Eric tagged on right from the beginning with that.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at this. One of the biggest things with, we talk about stigmas of mental illness, but the only reason why these stigmas exist today is because we don't talk about it.
Right.
And we saw that even through the transition of this podcast just with Tracy, this podcast forced her to start researching the things that she was suffering from, learning more about them. And by doing that, we found that this was the first time in her life she ever actually faced these head on.
Right.
Instead of just ignoring them and trying to pretend they weren't there.
Right. The funny thing is that with this podcast, I didn't plan on dealing with my stuff, but I did. Like, that was the really big thing that happened with this podcast, was I was like, oh man, I'm uncovering all this stuff, and I'm like digging through my stuff. And you can see that this is an actual like audio diary of me dealing with all of my stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that I went through. I mean, I actually had some really hard times throughout this because I was finally facing my stuff. And it was like, okay, now, because I was like going through episodes and all this stuff, and I'm doing research, I'm finding more stuff about my bipolar and my depression and anxiety and all this stuff. And I'm finding out so much about myself, and I'm dealing with it. I'm not just like kind of hiding it away saying, yeah, I'm bipolar, okay. I'm actually really, really dealing with it. So you can see this like diary of me dealing with it and getting so much better throughout this. So like in season 1, I'm like, yeah, I really want to learn how to meditate. And then I'm like slowly learning how to meditate. We even had Jess on, and she's kind of talking through meditation. She's going to help us meditate later. You guys are like in for a treat there. And I mean, and like now we love meditating. We are like so zen. I am like way more zen than I ever was. And now when something comes, I know it's going to be a chore, but I like to deal with it because I know that it is going to come back tenfold because I'm dealing with it instead of just kind of hiding it away. I might want to hide it away at first because I'm like, oh, that's going to be a pain. But then I'm like, okay, I'm going to deal with it.
So, Tracy, after our first season of this podcast, so I think we missed saying that this is actually the end of our third season.
Yes.
And after the first season, we kind of reevaluated the podcast, and we really started bringing in more elements of our personal life into it beyond just the neurodivergent part of it. And can you talk a little bit about what was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, well, so the reason that we started to do that was, I mean, I really wanted to show that, well, one, I kind of wanted to show that the intricacies of our life, like, you know, you might not always understand why I do things, but you're kind of like starting to try to understand. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, I don't always understand why I do the things that I do. I just do it. But I wanted to show that we can still function even though I'm neurodivergent, even though actually we found out that you're neurodivergent. We found out throughout this that you're ADHD, that I'm actually ADHD as well. So I wanted to show that we can have just as, you know, quote unquote normal of a life as anybody else, if not a better life or a cooler life. I mean, like, we are the happiest that we have ever been. So I really wanted to highlight that and just show all the really awesome things that we do, even though we're, you know, not normal. We have all these intricacies, and I have these things that you know, starting in season 1, people would have looked at as pitfalls and stuff, like, oh man, you're bipolar, I wouldn't hire you, or I wouldn't get near you because I don't know when you're gonna flip. And yeah, I have these times where all of a sudden I'm sad or I'm anxious, but I know how to kind of deal with them. I know how to deal with them even better now. And I think it's just kind of showing, like, yeah, we can do really cool things. We can travel. We can go on cool hikes with our friends and stuff like that. So it's kind of like showing, like, our cool life with that.
So, yeah, in when we started this podcast, it, you know, obviously this is not going to be a podcast. We're all not laughing because this is not a funny topic.
Right.
So this podcast was never intended to be about entertainment or humor. I mean, I hope that it's not so god awful boring that people can listen to it. But it was all about transforming, and not just. I think that us transforming was actually kind of a surprise to us.
Right. At least to the amount that we did transform.
Yeah. So, but we also were hoping that the people that would listen to the podcast would also transform, and based on what we've seen with our transformations, I can't see how somebody else listening to the podcast couldn't do the same thing. So,
can you speak a little bit to how you transformed through this?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that through the transformation of it, it helped for the first time because, like I said, she first faced these things that she was dealing with head on, which really helped me because it was like she was trying to see what was causing her to do the things they did, but it also transformed me in a way that now I look at everybody different because whether you have somebody in your life that's a neurodivergent or you have somebody or not, inevitably you have somebody that does something that you think is weird, you think is abnormal, is not right. Maybe it bothers you. And through learning all of this, what I've learned is rather than looking at those people and judging them, which I think is what the default most of us do, rather take the approach of looking at that person and say, they're doing this thing and I think it's weird. But instead of being like, they shouldn't do that because I think it's weird, rather try to understand why they do that thing. And by doing that, it's really, I feel like it's widened my mind because I have so much more understanding of the nuances between different people. I've also realized that while, we put all these people that have quote unquote mental illnesses or neurodivergent tendencies into a box and try to think, oh, they're like this minority. In the end, more and more people every day are getting diagnosed with some sort of condition, and the reason for that is because we all have them, right, in one way or another, and by the best thing as a society we could ever do is to look at those people and instead of judging them, try to understand them.
Right. We can look at what we all excel at instead of look at what's different instead. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that we've both changed throughout this, and it's just really kind of cool to see that. Mm-hmm. And I really like that. And I think kind of to your word about keeping it lighthearted, at one point you kind of touched on that, is I think that we have a lot of serious issues that we talk about, but we also kind of try to do it at a slightly lighthearted way that we do that. So I like how we do that at a lighthearted way.
And we try to have fun with it because we do a lot of stuff that just outlines our life.
Yeah, and obviously
the weird hikes we go on, the trips we go on.
Yeah, obviously we do have some very serious things that we take very seriously, like we have a suicide issue and stuff that we don't take as lighthearted. And we say it at the beginning. We're like, hey, just so you know. But we really talk about a plethora of things. So, and we encourage anybody to really listen to these episodes, and whether you're going through it, whether you think that somebody else is going through it, it can help anybody. It helped Eric, it helped me, and you can really take a lot from, I think, these episodes. Like I said, I wasn't planning on growing from this. I was just like, hey, let's speak out about this. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I grew in the past 3 years. So it was a really cool thing that I went through, and I'm really excited to see where we go through, because and I believe it's Thanksgiving that we're going to start season 4. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's really going to be a really cool season too, because I think we're going to go a little bit more spiritual, not fully off the racks, but I think we're going to, yeah, I know you're like, oh my gosh, where's she going with that? But no, I think we're going to go in just some really cool different directions too, where I'm kind of going now with my life, and just kind of like the kindness that you give out comes back to you type of thing, and just really taking that into mind. And I think that'll be a really cool thing. So yeah.
So I mean, I guess the moral of this whole 13 minutes that we've been sitting here talking about is that we hope that this message out there reaches somebody in this room,
yes,
that may be suffering from some sort of neurodivergent diagnosis, or maybe it's just somebody that wants to look at their life in a different way.
Right.
And we think that our podcast is a great tool for that. We're not telling you. I mean, I'm going to guess that most people in this room would not want to live the life that we live.
No.
But hopefully it puts you on the path to figure out what that life you want,
right,
what you want your life to look at, because when it all comes down to it, neurodivergent or not, I mean, if you say you're not neurodivergent, I'm just going to tell you that I disagree with you 100%, because I don't think there is anybody that isn't.
We're all a little weird.
So, but we just hope that it reaches somebody and they can find that it helps them find the path that we found to what we consider to be our perfect life.
Yes. And if you're curious to get to know us, listen to this podcast. So.
Yes. I did recently tell one of my best friends that I said the best way to learn about me is to listen to my podcast, and he's like, "Well, I don't need to listen to your podcast. I already know you." And I just laughed at him. I'm like, you don't know me at all, man. If give you three episodes of my podcast, and it'll blow your brains out. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
That was Stigmas and Open Wounds with Tracy and Eric. And up next, we're going to leave Eric up here and bring up his other co-host, Gavin. So apparently Eric is not listening to Bob's advice about not having multiple podcasts, but you're a veteran at this point, right? So, cool. These guys, I'll let you tell them. I'll let them tell you. I'll let you tell them about you.
So this podcast is going off in a completely different direction, if you can't tell by the colors. So before we start the podcast, we should knock somebody else. Does anybody want to raise their hand and say, isn't that a book?
No, nobody wants that today.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, that is a book. So, but luckily, this gentleman next to me wrote the book. So, and we haven't been sued by his publisher yet for using the name in our podcast.
I hope we don't. Yeah. Oh.
So, we are actually going to be talking about it. We're going to revisit an episode we did very early on. So, if this story is of interest to anybody, this is episode 10 in our feed. You can get the full story. This is going to be kind of a condensed version. But we are going to talk about something that goes by the name of the Appleton UFO Center, which is kind of a cult, kind of just people that like UFOs, depending on how you look at it.
It's kind of a cult.
So we will turn it over to Gavin. Gavin, take the story away.
Yeah. So before I kick it off, I just want to tell everybody in this room that Eric was really nervous about performing in front of people. So if you want to help him out, like just picture him in his underwear up here. He'll feel way more comfortable.
It's probably a good idea because literally you're all in your underwear right now to me. So
there.
So.
Yeah. So the Appleton UFO Center is started by a woman named Charlotte Blob. And blob is spelled B-L-O-B, like blob, which is completely appropriate for someone who's fascinated with space. She grows up and gets interested in that sort of thing, but she starts out life normally. She's in Appleton. She's a domestic housewife. A little extracurricular. She teaches ballroom dancing in the early 1960s. So pretty normal, right?
Pretty normal.
Yeah.
Until she finds the UFOs.
Now, exactly how long she's doing this, I'm not sure, but the newspapers really start to pick up on it in around 1964. She's living in Appleton still. It's specifically on Schaefer Street, so if you want to imagine where she's at. And they announced that she's the head of this UFO group that has 13 believers.
Yes.
They thought that aliens had come to Earth and were holding positions of authority in the government and in various industries. According to Charlotte Blob, the government was going to release the truth soon, and aliens could be recognized because they worked only 3 hours a day. They used the rest of the time to study and rest.
So if anybody is wondering, the UFO craze has existed for a very long time.
It's been around. It's been around. So Charlotte travels to California to meet up with a man named George Adamski. And George Adamski was huge in the UFO culture. Anyone here's into UFOs, you've probably heard the name. She kind of like learned underneath him for a while. His beliefs are strange as well. He claimed that he met a man named Orthon, and Orthon had come to visit from Venus. Orthon was described as a medium-height man with long blonde hair and tanned skin. He wore reddish-brown shoes and very strange trousers.
Everybody got a mental image of what this looks like right now?
Yeah, they're basically like described as like Norwegians.
Come on, that's mean.
That's
That's what they said. Huh?
they call them like Nordics, yeah. And that's like not even the strangest thing. Adamski said that in 1962 he had went to an interplanetary convention that was on Saturn, and while there he met up with JFK and the Pope.
Like you do.
Like you do. So, you know.
That's a total Gavin line, by the way. Everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, I'm not, for this episode, I'm not passing judgment on people who believe in UFOs. If you believe in UFOs, great, fine. But there's some strange elements here for sure. At Charlotte's invitation, Adamski comes to Appleton, speaks to 250 people at Appleton High School, which today is Appleton West. He says that while he was in town, he saw a UFO out his motel window in Appleton, and it was hovering over the Appleton airport. He said he took a bunch of photos, and when they were developed, he would show people. We've not seen the photos yet. He claimed that 60% of the people who worked in America were working on space projects, whether they knew it or not. And he said that the textbooks were 35 years out of date. The government knew a lot more about science, but they didn't put it in the textbooks because it was too expensive to print new ones.
Well, that kind of seems reasonable to me.
Sure. He also said that NASA astronauts were trained in jungles so that when they get to a planet that has jungles, they will be ready. Charlotte comes into her own. She goes on tour. She gives lectures. She's got an assistant with her who plays guitar and sings songs, kind of folk music type stuff. She appears in some very fringe documentaries, one called Rainbow Bridge, which I've not seen. If you can find a movie called Rainbow Bridge, I don't know what's in it, but you should check it out. And then her and her group of followers opened the UFO Education Center, which was at 1424 East Coolidge in Appleton. I'm going to give you the exact address.
So everybody is going to drive past this house tonight.
Yes,
right?
1424 East Coolidge, which is actually where well, not that house, but the neighborhood where my grandmother lives. And they always called that the presidential district in Appleton. So that's all fine and good. We have Susan Kolb out of Kiel, who one night sees an orange flashing light, and she wants to know more. So she goes to the UFO Center to kind of get some answers about what she saw in the night. I'm not sure what they told her, but it was very convincing because instead of going home to her husband, she decided she was going to move into the UFO Center. Her husband and other family members weren't very happy with that, but that's where she stayed for a while.
And as you can imagine, this is where the cult begins.
Yeah, some cult moments are kind of showing through at this point. Charlotte is repeatedly interviewed in various newspapers. I'm not going to quote them at length, but in one case, she's talking about how she was lecturing in a cabin in northern Wisconsin to a bunch of scientists, kind of telling them about the UFO situation. And while there was a knock on the door. They opened up the door, and there were students, and they invited the students in to listen to the lecture. And then at the end of the lecture, Charlotte realized these weren't ordinary students. These were aliens. And the way she knew that is because they had excellent tans, which is impossible for somebody in northern Wisconsin to get.
Logical, right, everybody? Checks out completely.
Yeah. She's going around telling people that there are between 30 and 50,000 aliens on Earth. They had been on the Earth for 13,000 years. Americans don't generally get to meet them because Americans are too cynical and have no faith in aliens. But the people of Mexico and South America are more open-minded, so the aliens like to visit them more often.
Plus, it's prettier.
Yeah. She said that the aliens had contacted humans a total of 83 times, a very specific number. And they would consistently warn against nuclear power, saying it's all fine and good now, but once you get into space, you don't want that nuclear power up there. Her assistant spoke to the Post-Crescent. He said, "We are not alone. We are not gods, but little children. We would never be as far along as we are if not for these beings. How can we be so arrogant as to think we made all the progress of recent years on our own? They obviously have technologically superior civilizations and can have a profound effect on ours. Their presence is bound to release many creative energies. The government has reams and reams of material, and they keep saying, 'We'll let you know sometime.' Well, we can't wait forever. People are beginning to feel they are being treated like they are in kindergarten."
In kindergarten.
Yeah. So, I know that the guy from Ancient Aliens was coming through town. Has he been through, or is that coming up yet? Does anybody know? Okay, nobody knows.
No, but I have no idea.
The guy from the meme who goes, "Aliens." Yeah. So he's at the PAC soon, if not already. So I pointed that out because a lot of this resonates with what they're still saying on the History Channel shows. Mm. Jimmy Carter, while campaigning for president, stops in Appleton in March 1976. The UFO Center shows up to greet him at the airport, and they yelled out, "Carter, when you become president, will you release the behind closed doors information about UFOs the government has?"
And what did he say, Gavin?
Carter said, "Yes.
Of course he will.
I would make these kinds of data available to the public as president to help resolve the mystery around it." He said, "I understand that our Air Force pilots out there are seeing things, and the public should know what they're seeing."
And that did happen, right?
That he released it?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't either.
He agreed to have a meeting with the UFO Education Center in Appleton after the election, which also never happened. Post-Crescent speaks with the center again in 1976, shortly after this, and they say, "We're not a bunch of kooks. We're not like those people who talk about mutilated animals and kidnappings. Neighbors and friends are very thankful. They say, 'Thank God we've got someone who's helping us get these answers.' The only disrespect that we have is from people who in life in general are skeptical and at odds with life in general. Grade school children are very excited about space. Why can't everybody else be as excited as them?" Now, keep in mind, a little bit ago in our story, we had Susan Kolb, who moved into the UFO Education Center. It's now been about 2 years, and she's still living there. And this whole time, her family's thinking about how to get her back. So her husband, in the middle of the night, takes a flagpole, uses it as a battering ram, and knocks in the front door of the UFO Education Center and kidnaps his wife. Drives her to a cabin north of Green Bay where they hire a woman named Sally Miller to what they call deprogram her. But Susan Kolb escapes and goes back to the UFO Center and says, "As far as I'm concerned, everything they do there is legitimate and there's no reason for me to be deprogrammed. I think this is perfectly fine." Well, the family wasn't ready to give up that easy. They hire a nationally famous deprogrammer, a man named Ted Patrick, who had been working with various cults over the years, getting people out of cults. He now goes in and tries to kidnap Susan Kolb. He's a little smarter about it. He doesn't wait till the middle of the night. He doesn't break in. She's actually got a day job at the First National Bank in Appleton. Somehow, throughout this, she maintains a job, so good for her. So he kind of knows her routine. He's watching a couple days, and then one day he scoops her up, throws her in the back of his vehicle, and drives off. Doesn't even tell her family where he's taking her. He doesn't want any chance that anything is going to happen. The UFO Center reports this to the district attorney, who at the time was David Prosser. David Prosser, later a very famous/notorious Supreme Court justice in Wisconsin. But at this time, he's just a district attorney, and he's thinking of opening up an investigation because he's starting to hear some very strange things about this UFO Center. And he wants to know, are they bad? Is this kidnapping bad? Who's the good guys here? This time, the deprogramming worked. Susan came back, and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad to be away from the UFO Center and have a free will of my own again." She said, "They brainwashed me. They made me hate my family, and they made me hire an attorney. I paid him $4,000 to try to divorce my husband, which never went through. She said they did all kinds of weird mind control, hypnotism, and mental telepathy to keep me in the UFO center, which still sounds weird, but after she got out, she tried to get her other friends she had previously recruited to leave the UFO center, but they wouldn't leave because now they suspected that she was working for the CIA. That was more or less the end of the UFO center. After that, that was like the last hurrah. I don't know how long it stuck around after that, but the newspaper stopped giving them publicity after this incident. So, Eric, you want to jump in? I got a little more, but if you want to jump in at this point.
Well, I mean, I don't. Does anybody out there have a question about this story? Let's try to open it up to the group. Nobody? Do we have any UFO lovers? Does anybody know anybody that was in the UFO center?
I would love to know someone who was in the UFO center.
We want eyewitness accounts of this. We want to know how bad this was.
Yeah, I do. We're not going to talk about it tonight, but I do have a post from a woman named Mary who was in. She wrote like a 4-page thing of her time, and it is not favorable.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. There may have been
there was,
programming
there
going
was
on
definitely some coercement to keep people there and to keep their money flowing into the center so they couldn't leave. It's definitely a cult.
I would say, I'm going to kind of spin this off, but this is personally one of my favorite stories we ever covered on. But just to give you all kind of an insight into some of the things you hear on this is because all of our stories happen. I mean, we're kind of liberal at times about the range we go, but we typically try to keep it in this area. And some of the stories you might hear that we've done that I'm sure nobody ever knows of. We recently did an episode on the Exorcist of Appleton. Mm-hmm. There was an
apparently dropped this week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's the newest episode. So what other? Oh, and then the what was the thing in Stevensville? The cryogenics lab.
Oh,
in Stevensville.
Yeah. So we had a guy in Appleton. Anybody who's of an older generation will know. His nickname was Joe the Trader, and he had kind of like a liquidation store, but also like his hobby was he opened a cryogenic center. So not too far outside of the Appleton city limits, he had numerous frozen bodies on his property, which was debatably illegal. But where his head is now, I don't know. I think it's actually in Ellington.
Oh,
I think it's in Ellington.
Well, my mom lives in Ellington, so.
Okay, so they're the same thing. Okay, all right. So, I mean, I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly at this moment where it was. I'm sure that probably, if you want to see the show notes for this, the show notes are just at my personal website, which is gavinschmidt.com, which is SCHMITT. If you put a D in there, I don't know what'll happen. And I put all the show notes on, so you can see the longer versions of these than what usually ends up on air.
Yeah, and we should pimp out one more episode just because it is so close to us right now. But there is an episode about when little kids were, I believe, across the street finding dead body parts in their playground.
Yes, and that story is actually in more detail in the book of the same name as well. That's the famous Appleton Butcher story, which happened in the 1960s. I was fortunate enough to get the police files on that released. Normally, those would not be released because it was never officially cleared because the woman, they knew who did it, but she was never charged and convicted, so it's officially unsolved, even though we all know. But they did release it to me, and there's some weird stuff. They're not just the body parts that were found around Appleton, with the famous nursery rhyme that goes with that about finding the toes at Old St. Joe's, which is St. Joseph's, like a block or two from here. But But yeah, as you might gather, the woman had some mental health issues, and not to make light of that after we just did the stigmas and wounds, but that is not the way that you handle a mental health crisis.
That person needed Jess's podcast. So
Yeah.
So that's Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem, and we do encourage everybody to check it out. And because if you're into murder and mayhem and sometimes just history, we do sway off of even the murder and mayhem thing every once in a while. But if you're interested in learning all the craziness that happens around you, please tune in.
All right. David, we good on time? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we're both out.
Nice work, guys. And don't worry, it is historical murder and mayhem. Appleton is a much safer place to live nowadays. So up next to decompress from all that murder and mayhem, we have Jess giving us a guided meditation and reminding us to be kind. So without further ado, Jess.
Aw, thanks. I am a brown person living in Wisconsin, so I can let you know I am, in fact, an alien. Yes. Guided loving kindness. There is never a wrong time to invite more love, peace, and joy into your world. So wherever you're at in your physical, mental, and emotional space, I invite you to find a moment to pause and reflect. Find a comfortable place to be in your body. Enjoy a deep breath in through your nose. Open mouth, exhale. Again, deep breath in. Open mouth, exhale. Deep breathing helps regulate the nervous system, so whenever you are in a state of physical, mental, or emotional tension, direct your focus to your breath. Once more. Deep breath in through your nose. Open mouth, exhale. As you feel comfortable to, close your eyes. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. See yourself. As you look into this imagined mirror, bring to mind someone in your life who you love and support, and who you feel love and support from. Bring this person fully to mind, their face, body, mannerisms, and facial expressions. Perhaps you remember some loving and supportive word they shared or action they took. Now, imagine seeing them in the mirror as yourself. For a moment, you are one. Imagine saying to them, "May you be happy. May you be loved. May you feel peaceful. May you experience and embrace joy." Looking into the mirror, slowly their image fades, and the image of yourself returns. Breathe. Now, bring to mind someone in your life who you feel neutral toward. This might be a barista at a coffee shop you frequent, a store clerk, your mail carrier, or a stranger you smiled at or who smiled at you as you passed by. Bring this person fully to mind. Now, imagine seeing them in the mirror as yourself. For a moment, you are one. Imagine saying to them, "May you be happy. May you be loved. May you feel peaceful. May you experience and embrace joy." Looking into the mirror, slowly their image fades and the image of yourself returns. Breathe. Now, bring to mind someone in your life who you feel challenged by, or who brings up in you a mild sense of tension. This might be a family member, or coworker, or even a friend you might at times feel slightly annoyed by. Bring this person fully to mind, their face, body, mannerisms, and facial expressions. Perhaps you recall a time they said or did something that caused you just a bit of annoyance or unease in your body. Now, imagine seeing them in the mirror as yourself. For a moment, you are one. Imagine saying to them, "May you be happy. May you be loved. May you feel peaceful. May you experience and embrace joy." Looking into the mirror, slowly their image fades and the image of yourself returns. Breathe. Now, recall moments when you have not been kind. Perhaps you said something or did some action in anger. Notice what feelings come up as you bring this memory to mind. Setting down that memory and the feelings around it, now recall moments when you have been kind, supportive, and loving. See your whole self in the mirror before you, and say to your whole self, "May I be happy. May I be loved. May I feel peaceful. May I experience and embrace joy." Bring gentle movement to your body, slowly blinking open your eyes if they're closed. Go into the rest of your day, evening, week, and weekend, knowing your full capacity for kindness. Thank you for meditating with me. Peace.
Thanks, Jess. Take a seat. You're not done yet. Jess, get back here. I have one more question for you before we move on. So this is a taste and a sample of what Jess does 3 times a week. Jess, is this exactly what people should be expecting when they tune into the meditation well?
This is exactly what people should be expecting.
Because I don't think you said the meditation well at all.
Oh, yeah, I said nothing about the meditation
so
well, but
that's
there
the
it is.
podcast. That's what we're here for. So now
Yeah.
that we're all super focused and ready to be kind, we're going to go into a quick break, actually, for 15 minutes. So this is going to be a chance for y'all to grab a beer and grab some food from the food truck. We up next will be Gary Arndt with Everything Everywhere Daily, that show that Bob said was really popular or something like that. And then after that, we will have our gracious hosts, Bobby and Allison Fleshman, up here to tell us a little bit more about behind the scenes that happens here, and it's a chance for y'all to do a live Q&A with them. I have a wireless microphone to hand out to you people so we can hear you on the podcast. So, ready? Break. Last call for the podcast. 1 minute left. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the intermission. Everyone get another beer? Good. Okay, at least one person did. Up next, we're going to... anyone in here like donuts? Okay, we got some donut lovers. Well, this is not the kind of donut you may like. It's a historical donut, particularly a Roman donut, as Gary explained it to me earlier. So this is our friend Gary Arndt. He's going to tell you about his podcast, Everything Everywhere Daily, and then give you a taste of it. So, Gary, here's the microphone. Come over here because I don't want you to feed back. AK, you can't stand right in front of the speaker.
This is not me explaining my podcast. This is tomorrow's episode of my podcast. This is episode number 1587 of Everything Everywhere Daily, a podcast that I started in the middle of the pandemic because I was desperate and had to do something. I was a travel photographer at the time, and my business dwindled to zero. And so I made a massive pivot, did this, and so far the show's doing pretty good. I got about 50,000 people that listen every day around the world, and it's my job. And when David asked me to do this, I thought of what am I going to talk about? And it came to me instantly. The Battle of Alesia. How many people here have heard of the Battle of Alesia? Excellent, because I can make everything up and none of you will know. But let me ask you another question. What month is it? November. What does November mean? What does it mean? The 9th month. Except it's really the 11th month, but it means the 9th month, just like October is the 8th month, December is the 10th month. It all comes from ancient Rome. 30% of the words in the English language come directly from Latin, not from French, which is also a Romance language which comes from Latin. So we rely heavily on that. Our calendar is the Gregorian calendar, which is a slight modification of the Julian calendar, which Julius Caesar created. Actually, he lifted it from a guy called Sisogenes of Alexandria, but it's the calendar we have today. Our alphabet is the Latin alphabet. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Romans were horrible people. Truly horrible people. And as I'll explain, Julius Caesar was a pretty horrible guy. If we were living in that area, instead of making analogies and comparisons to Hitler, we would make comparisons to Julius Caesar. But nonetheless, the world we live in was in large part in the West created by Rome. And Rome was in 3 phases. There was the Roman Kingdom, which nobody ever talks about, the Roman Republic, and the Roman Empire. And this story is at the tail end of the Roman Republic. And this is the part of history that gets all the attention. William Shakespeare wrote about Antony and Cleopatra. He wrote the play Julius Caesar. All happened at the end of the Republic. The HBO series Rome, if you ever remember that, which is actually pretty good, end of the Republic. The movie Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, end of the Republic. All of the people that you may have heard of from this period come here. And this is fundamentally a story about Julius Caesar, the guy who killed the Republic. Caesar was incredibly ambitious, and this was an attribute which was encouraged in the Roman nobility. They had a thing called the cursus honorum, which was a series of elected positions that you went up throughout your life. You started at the age of about 30, and then you worked your way up, and then maybe by the age of 42 was the earliest age you could become the highest office in the land, which was consul. There were 2 consuls selected every year to check each other, and it was a 1-year term. And after your year as consul, they normally shift you off to the provinces where you can make a whole bunch of money by being corrupt. Caesar becomes consul, and afterwards he says, I want to become the governor of 2 provinces, Transalpine and Cisalpine Gaul. And that basically means Gaul on this side and that side of the Alps. And Gaul is what we would call today France. The Gauls scared the hell out of the Romans. In the year 390, a bunch of Gauls came into Italy and sacked Rome. And for 3 centuries, the Romans told stories of the Gauls that they were like the boogeyman. Better be good, or the Gauls are going to come and get you. And the Gauls were totally different than the Romans. The Romans were organized. They were cool, collected. The Gauls, does anyone here remember a band called Molly Hatchet? Have you ever seen a cover of a Molly Hatchet album? Those were the Gauls. They had the enormous mustaches. They had the double-edged battle axes. If you've ever played a video game like Civilization or Age of Empires, they were the berserkers. When they fought, they were looking for individual glory, one-on-one combat. And to the Romans, what made them barbarians is that they wore trousers. Literally, to be a trouser wearer was to be a barbarian. And Caesar wants to go to this place. He gets there, and he immediately picks a fight. There was a group called the Helvetii and Helvetica, if you've ever heard the font, are named after these people, as is the name of Switzerland in Swiss German. They're moving, and Caesar's like, oh, well, you're violating a treaty. I guess I better attack you. And so he starts doing this and picking off all of these Gallic tribes one by one. And for 6 years, he begins doing this with absolutely no approval from the Roman Senate. He just does it because he can make a lot of money, and the people back home in Rome love it. He is defeating the boogeyman. These Gauls that 300 years earlier had sacked Rome. The Gauls were not one people. They were a whole bunch of individual tribes. And after getting their butts handed to them by Caesar for several years, they realize we need to do something. And so they come together and they choose a single leader to run their armies called Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix changes everything completely. He starts organizing raids against the Romans, and Romans start losing territory. He does a pretty good job. But Caesar eventually corners Vercingetorix in a city known as Alesia, in what is today France. Alesia is a well-fortified town. It's up on a hill, and Caesar surrounds it with about 40,000 men, with about equivalent number of men inside. Alesia is on a hilltop, and it's well-fortified, so rather than attack the town, what Caesar decides to do is, I'm going to starve them out. And he builds a wall around Alesia, an 11-mile wooden wall to make sure that nobody ever escapes. Vercingetorix realizes what's happening here, so he sends out several units to try to confront the Romans while they're building the wall. Building the wall takes about 3 weeks, and a couple of them manage to sneak past. But eventually the wall is built, and they are completely surrounded. Vercingetorix is now playing a waiting game because there's 250,000 Gauls that can come to the rescue to fight the 60,000 Romans that are besieging Alesia. They just have to wait and have enough food. Problem is, they do not have enough food. So eventually, they make the decision to send the women, the children, and the old people out of the gates of Alesia, figuring that Caesar will do the reasonable thing and let them pass. I told you Caesar was a bastard, and he does not. He lets them starve, and they're stuck between the walls of the city of Alesia and the walls that they built. But Vercingetorix decided they needed walls for their they needed the food for their warriors if this was ever going to happen, because they needed to wait for this huge army to arrive. Caesar catches wind that this enormous army was going to arrive to wipe out the Romans. 250,000 men to fight about 40 to 60,000 Romans. Now the question is, what would you do? You're besieging these people over here, and now all of a sudden you have a massively superior force coming to attack you. What do? I contend that 99 times out of 100, from a general in history, doesn't matter what point in history, you're going to retreat. We can't do these things. We don't have enough people. We're outnumbered. We're going to pull back, fight another day. But not Caesar, because he's incredibly ambitious and incredibly lucky. So when David introduced me, he talked about a Roman donut. That 11-mile wall that surrounded Alesia, Caesar built a 13-mile wall around the other wall. And the Romans were inside the two walls, creating the Roman donut. Now, in many times in history, an army may have been surrounded. The United States 101st Airborne during the Battle of the Bulge and Bastogne was surrounded by the Germans. Happens many times. This is the only time I can think of in history where an army was surrounded and then inside the surrounding had another army. So it was a donut filled with Romans. So the day eventually arrives where the other army shows up. And they got a lot of guys. But they had built the wall by then. They had enough time to do it. And they start attacking. And Vercingetorix sees what's happening. And he leaves the city of Alesia and starts attacking. And Caesar is putting out fires everywhere. They're attacking this part of the wall. He's moving people all over all the time. He is personally taking part in all of these battles, getting people to go from here to there. One of his top lieutenants was Mark Antony, a guy you've probably heard of from history. He's leading troops here and there. Two separate occasions. Vercingetorix tries to take his units out of Alesia, attack the wall, and they fail. Finally, on their third attempt, Caesar realizes that they cannot be doing this forever. Being in a Roman donut is not a good place to be. We have enemies on the outside and the inside. So they attack again, and Caesar decides, okay, this is what we're going to do. They do a massive cavalry attack. They leave the outer wall. They attack the rear of the big army that came to visit them, and they crush the Gauls. Being in a Roman donut inside a wooden fence, he defeats this larger army, and the next day, Vercingetorix surrenders. Gaul basically ceases to exist and becomes a province of Rome. Caesar writes about this. The commentaries of Caesar are the oldest known autobiography in history that we know was written by the person who participated in the events. Granted, it was all propaganda designed for the Roman people, but we're very confident that he wrote this. He wrote it in the third person. He referred to himself as Caesar, describing all the events that happened. The Roman people go nuts. They think that this is just swell. The Gauls, this boogeyman that has confronted Rome for 300 years, have been defeated. The Senate provides games, but they do not provide Caesar the one thing that he wants. The highest honor that can be bestowed upon any Roman general, a triumph. And over the next 2 years, this causes a political conflict between Caesar and the Senate, who, quite frankly, don't like Caesar because everything he did was never approved by the Senate. He became fantastically wealthy, became the richest man in Rome, and has a whole bunch of legions that are now loyal just to him. 2 years later, Caesar ends up going to Rome to make his claim, crosses the Rubicon, something I'm sure you're familiar with, claims that the die is now cast, marched on Rome. There's a civil war. Caesar wins. He's declared dictator for life. Stab, stab, stab by Brutus. There's another civil war with Octavian and Mark Antony, and it creates the Roman Empire. They take over everything around the Mediterranean. Eventually it collapses in the West, blah, 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 blah. But the world we live in today is by and large a result of the crazy decision made by Julius Caesar to make a Roman donut.
Thanks, Gary. All right, that was Everything Everywhere Daily with Gary. And up next, our lovely hosts, Allison and Bobby. I'm going to have you guys come on up here while I start to turn on the wireless microphone so that we can get some Q&A going. I have asked Gary to come up with a couple of questions just to cue the room here for a little bit. So you guys can think of some questions. If you're not familiar with Bobby and Allison's story, maybe we can give a quick recap. Tap on, just hit the space bar. Boom! Yeah, you guys get to sit on the fancy chairs. Get on up there. Find your spot. Ooh, microphone for you.
Fancy spot. Ooh.
I'll actually turn on your microphones, though. Is this on? That's
I feel like there should be a fern between us.
You should be on here. You might start being...
What? Okay. So in addition to Everything Everywhere Daily, I also help out with another podcast called Respecting the Beer, which also happens to be the motto of this establishment that we are in right now, McFleshman's. And with me on the show is, of course, I'll use the introduction I did for the last episode, Astronomy Magazine's Brewer of the Year and Brewing Magazine's Astronomer of the Year, Bobby Fleshman.
Check.
And the professor of physical, in addition to emotional and mental chemistry, Allison McCoy.
Yay.
On the podcast, we talk about the science, the culture, the history, and the economics of beer and brewing. Each episode is a little bit different. So for this episode, this is going to be an actual episode of the podcast, we wanted to do a Q&A of everyone. So if you've been to McFleshman's, if you've been here before or have a question about beer or brewing, you're going to have a chance to ask it to Bobby and Allison. So before we start with that, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, oh, I'm afraid of slipping in the shower, and 10 being, I'm not sure if they packed the parachute right, how afraid were you guys when you made the decision to start a microbrewery?
I'm funnier than you are, so I'm going to go first.
Also, this is live banter. If you guys listen to the show, she's the one that keeps it moving.
We're married, by the way, so I can get away with it. And Whittier, so yeah. It depends on, to answer your question, it depends. Am I at the moment that we decided or now? Thinking
at
back.
The moment you decided, because they are academics, and academics are not known as being,
we cannot answer a direct question.
Risk-tolerant people. Yes. There's tenure exists for a reason, and it's not because you like taking risks. So when you guys made the decision to buy this building and start a brewery and buy all that stainless steel junk in the back, I mean, that's a huge decision for anybody.
Shiny shit's expensive, yes. Cool. Scale of 1 to 10. 1 was
slipping in the shower.
And 10 was, do I have the parachute working right? Or even on as I've jumped out of the plane.
Right.
I would say 3.75.
I was thinking more of 3.78.
That's fair.
Yeah, okay.
I would go with pi. Just
good
little
one.
less than...
He's the irrational one.
But that's, okay, so that's reasonably low.
Yeah.
Was it because you were confident that this would work? Or, I mean...
I have to stand for this.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
this
It seems like we're just being like...
We can't tell if you're standing or sitting.
That's fair. I am a whopping 5'2". Stand so I can look shorter. Cool. I don't know. It was now we were so crazy. I want to go back to past me and slap myself and then patent the time machine that I just made to go back and slap myself and then make money on that. But no, I think at the time we were just naive. We didn't understand what it meant to build a place and to the amount of work that would go into it. But that naivety is essential when you're an entrepreneur, I think.
There's much truth in that.
I hope so, because, if there's falsity in that, then we're kind of paddling up the wrong stream.
Gary was saying how it sounds as though academics don't take chances. Some of them do. I'm an exception maybe to that rule. Even if I see it, I face it head on. I love challenge. I love all of it. Allison is a very patient person.
The most.
But yeah, I would say definitely on the low end of the afraid of this to make this commitment for me. Yeah.
Well, and I also think when you sprinkle in a global pandemic, we didn't really know what we were getting into.
I love challenge. I don't want to say I love pandemics, but
potato,
yeah.
man.
Yeah. We shifted our entire business plan to become a distributing brewery because that was our month 18 of our business, and we had to shift. And that's the time when you have such capital investment, you've got to keep moving on your original plan.
And
but
luckily in that time, because of that quick shift, we were able to keep all of our employees employed throughout the entire pandemic.
Yep. I should say that this week we sold a minivan. This minivan has a story.
Was this Van Morrison or was this Kurt Vonnegut?
There was White Snake, and then there was...
No, this is Kurt Vonnegut.
This is Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah. They have nicknames.
Tell the backstory.
Bobby was like, I need to... So I have an infant at home, and he's like, we got to distribute all of a sudden. We're like, oh, shit, okay, how are we going to do this? And so he's like, I'm just going to go out and sell. And... it was because of you that I was a vector at Lawrence, of a transmission vector, because you were going out into all these bars, like selling things, and I was like, I can't teach. I have to teach remotely now because I was exposed to you. Oh, the things. Anyway.
The words we learned during COVID.
I know. Anyway, long story short, he's like, our truck, we had to lift beer up into it, and he's like, you know what we really need? Now, granted, we waited to have a child. We had a brewery first, then we had a kid. But we always swore we would never be a minivan owner, and he comes to me and he's like, you know what we really need? A Dodge Caravan, but for the brewery.
If you can get over the emasculation...
He's about to emote on this Dodge Caravan.
Yeah, if you want to make a minivan cool, put 15 half barrels of beer in it. That...
Oh. And then what's even better is then he just like pushes the button and the door... Well, we paid $2,000 for this thing, so the door was like...
The last half was assisted,
but we owned it. We paid $2,000. We owned it for like 5 years.
Sold it this week
for $800.
I'm like, I'll take it every day.
And I saw.
Also, if you go to Menards and you see the guy in the Ford diesel dually, whatever, and he's loading it up with plywood, and it's raining outside, he has to wrap it in a tarp. I can just do that with a minivan. You're gonna roll in and push the button and just lower it and just drive away.
So if you're interested in a minivan and can't quite jump, like if you need the parachute to make sure that it's on, Bobby will convince you that a minivan is worth the investment. Sorry, we digress.
Well, but it's part of the whole entrepreneurial story, yeah.
So let me then ask, and this will be my last question before we open it up. What was the thing in the process of creating McFleshman's that you did not anticipate? You probably thought a lot about the beer and the brewing. But what, from like a business standpoint, did you like? Oh man, this is something we didn't realize.
I'll be very direct and say the business of owning a business.
I was going to say payroll.
Yeah.
No, soft costs.
Yeah.
Shit's expensive. So you know how you go into like a grocery store and you always hear the exact same songs? That's because it costs us. We have to pay $2,000 a year to all the different licensing companies of the music industry that artists don't actually ever get a cut of that, which is another story. But there's so much soft costs. And if you follow the rules, you end up spending, we spend probably, I would say, $10,000 a year in just soft costs alone. And soft costs, what I mean is like making sure that you've paid this one fee for this insurance, and then they're going to audit this insurance, and then there's adjustments. So you have to pay an extra fee to make sure that you have that backed up. And
I'm sure there's a pile of business owners here.
Right?
Sure.
Do you understand? Yeah. I'm getting some, there's like the head bob yes, and then there's like the aggressive yes, I can't handle this. This is so true. And we had no idea. And then I love our CPA. But our CPA, they're so smart. But I should have, I have a PhD in whatever kind of chemistry, and yet I should have just been an accountant.
I took an accounting class my freshman year of college, and I learned two things. One, accounting is very important. Two, I do not want to be an accountant.
Yes.
Those were the two things
I learned that I should have been an accountant. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've learned, though. I have a budget now, which is fun.
All right, I'm sure a lot of people here are McFleshman's regulars, and they have questions. Raise your hand if you got a question for either
beer
Bobby
questions.
or Allison.
Or any. Don't be restricted,
Oh, come on. You guys didn't come up here to not ask questions. Somebody.
Anything.
What's the name of our pets? That sounds great.
I'm drinking Allison's beer because
Lieutenant
I don't have
Commander
one.
Data and Carnot, named after the French thermodynamicist.
All right, we got somebody.
You stole my beer.
Hey,
Get your
drink
own
faster.
damn beer.
So I guess besides like 547 with your double IPA, what was the hardest beer to make and why?
Triple debacle. Wait, I don't know. Wait, what do you mean by make?
Like the hardest to brew.
Design or to brew? That's
I'm going to immediately jump into my music analogies. Not a musician per se, but I understand that songs are written in 5 minutes or 50 years. Which would be the one that took 50 years to create? 15 years.
For you, I would say your white whale is tall mast.
Always, yeah, definitely.
Tall mast IPA. It's because he was never satisfied with it. And you would. And I don't like IPAs. I own a brewery and can't stand them. I drink dark things like porters or stouts. It's good.
Well, Tall Mast is we're trying to replicate a beer that no longer exists. This is a beer that's 120 years old in terms of its makeup. So we're trying to replicate something that we can't compare to. So I'm chasing this thing that's not really available except written down and interpreted. But I will say that the one that Allison maybe doesn't give me enough credit for chasing is Pirates Cove. Pirates Cove is our number one selling
It's
beer.
our German Helles.
Yeah, and it is so nuanced and it's so lost on the everyday beer drinker.
I'm scanning the room to find her. I don't even see her.
But
I think there might be one back there.
If you listen to our podcast, we'd probably go into it once in a while. But I would say that one keeps me awake because it does scratch every itch of the technician and the artist and the historian, if you want to call me that, because I'm able to draw on all that.
So
yeah.
we've talked about this in the podcast. One, Pirates Cove was named after a bar that was next door.
Yeah, right. This wall is black. If you were to take this sheetrock down and look at it, it's black because there was a fire that happened next door.
So over here there's a square. Oh, that's loud. So there's a square.
Watch out, your feedback.
Yep.
Okay.
There's a square, and that's the access to the attic, conveniently under the staircase that Gary suggested we build, so you can't actually get to it. And inside we found a bunch of crates that were more over here, and these crates were they had a whole bunch of these little tabs from Valley dairy products, so like the toppers of yogurt and milk and different dairy product things, but they were also scorched to high hell. Which is something we say down south, which meant a lot. And so all the Pirates Cove that burned down, like it came and burned this part too up above. And there's a whole bunch of just scorched old boxes.
Does anyone remember Pirates Cove? Is anyone from Appleton from the 80s?
I think 86 is when it burned down, I think.
Anyone that was around that time can tell you stories about how they'd never carded.
I was 3 at the time.
I lived here in 86. And I did not know that they did not card. Had I known that, I would have visited Pirates Cove. Why do I learn this stuff so many years after the fact?
There's a drink called the Vulcan Mind Probe. Yes, the Vulcan Mind Probe. And people come in once every couple weeks and talk about how they knew a place called Pirates Cove and there was this drink. And they never remember what color it was. What color was it?
Purple?
See, I get blue, yellow, and green. Everybody seems to have it. Maybe they changed it all the time. Maybe the memory, it lives up to its name.
The menu's downstairs. We have a frame. Someone brought in the menu, and then we took a picture, and we have a frame of it downstairs.
Okay, I had a two-part question. Pirates Cove was the name of the place. It's currently the beer garden.
Yep.
But I've been at the bar, people come in and they say, "What's your closest thing to Bud Light?" And you give them a Pirates Cove. So on one level, Pirates Cove is probably the most approachable beer you have in that it is like other lagers. But you've also said it's your most challenging beer in some ways.
Bingo. Oh, she's delicate.
So State Street Light Lager is the one that we make that's most like those industrial light lagers. It has its place. It's even less malty, even less flavor. For summertime drinking, I think it's awesome, but Pirates Cove is meant to be both. It's meant to be for people who care about the nuance and people that don't want to have to think about it.
Remind me, do you decoct Pirates Cove?
How long is this episode?
We have an episode about
We do have an
Concoction.
episode. So basically,
The answer is yes.
old world way of making beer involves cooking some of your ingredients in a way that we don't do in modern times. And we do that with Pirate's Cove. We still do that.
Anything to get Bobby to say decoction.
Decoction, yeah. So it's crazy because it's the beer we make the most of, and we do the most work on it. And we knew in the beginning we were putting our neck in a noose, but here we are.
It's also named after a Tom Petty song.
Oh, there's the hidden meaning.
That's the hidden meaning.
Hidden
it's
naming.
Pirates Cove, yes, but there's a wonderful song called "A Trip to Pirates Cove," and Bobby and I are insane Tom Petty fans.
Anybody Tom Petty
That's a Tom
people?
Petty fan?
Okay.
Yes.
So between us, I think we've probably seen Tom Petty
So
maybe.
you've seen him 48 times. I've seen him 34.
Yeah. We got matching tattoos.
We do.
How creepy is that? Or yeah.
And when he died, people were asking, they're like, "Are you gonna like paint him on the wall?" And we're like, "We can't. It's just too close." It's
it'll be like Kurt Cobain or something when it goes up on the wall. It'll look like that. It'll
We have
be
David
ruined.
Bowie out there, and if you notice, that David Bowie has a purple teardrop for Prince on his shoulder.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
That was a tribute to Chad Brady, who did our mural. He did that on his own.
The mural on the outside of the building.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah. So crazy Tom Petty fans, which is why Pirates Go. That's the
other
truest
questions?
meaning of the name.
Oh, we got one. So, Stepchild is, I think, brewing right now.
In the fermenter.
It's in the fermenter.
Timely comment.
And,
Yeah.
And it smells so good.
Yeah.
But my question is, my understanding is it's called that because you were trying to brew 547.
Yep.
And the grain bill was screwed up somehow,
Yep.
and it came out red.
Yep.
Which I think is, I love the name. I'm not a fan of 547, which I know is not a popular thing to say here.
Joel's not here, so
Joel's
There
not
was
here,
some
so it's safe.
aggressive toasts
It's safe. It's
just
safe.
now.
yeah, you're somewhat safe.
But the Stepchild, I had it. I think it's been 2 years.
It
since
may
you
be
brewed it?
3.
Three.
It's been a
Three.
bit. Yeah.
I remember enjoying it.
Yep.
And my question is, how do you repeat a grain bill you
A
don't know what
mistake.
was in
yeah.
it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that could have been as much an answer as either Tallmast or Pirates Cove to which beer is the hardest to make. How do you make something that you don't even know what it was? So with that
Stop
beer,
talking. Bobby
yeah.
is a grain whisperer, and he can honestly I think you can rebuild beer by just drinking it.
I wish. I mean, that's the beauty of beer. It's so multidisciplinary.
That's
She's
fair.
giving me a lot of credit here. Yeah.
I also question you a lot.
Yeah, can you tell? Does anyone listen to the podcast or know
But
Allison?
no, I really do think. I think that we knew what we had while we were there.
No, we didn't. That's the beauty.
Well, I guess that's true because it was a mistake.
Yeah. Nope.
Yeah, they sent the wrong grain.
So, okay, the thing is, we knew the lot number on the bags. I called the plant manager during brew day. I said, this is what we have literally during the brew. This is what we're working with. It's looking like this. Can you give me any intel? And I literally have him on my phone. I'm able to speed dial him, and he says, hey, we ran this malt after or before yours, and so I guess before, and it must have snuck in because it was still, the remnants were in the auger. From that, I was able to make some decisions on the fly, and we decided, okay, this can't be 547. It doesn't look like 547, so we're not going to hop it like 547, and it became a tropical version of the same alcohol level because at that point, it's the same amount of grain. It's just a little different flavor. We went with the tropical versus citrus West Coast, and the subsequent dry hopping went down that same pathway to make a sister of, and we didn't have a name. That we were struggling because we figured out, we pivoted, we made a beer that worked on the fly, and then we were worried about label and name. And by the way, that's where we spent a lot of our time. Labels and names. It's so much. A lot of breweries, I think, at least appear to just kind of throw something at the wall, but we don't do that. But Alex Schultz came to the rescue the next day. He does a lot of our labels and branding.
Alderperson District 9.
Yeah, he does all these things. If anyone knows Alex, we all love and want to choke Alex all the time.
We call him our scapegoat, which is also what we named
there's
our
a beer
Bach
named
beer.
Scapegoat that's named after him, effectively. So Stepchild it was. He came the next day with redheaded Stepchild. It's not part of the name, but it's called Stepchild, and it's red IPA for 547.
So we have a question here from someone who I believe is new to McFleshman's.
Very new to
It's your first
McFleshman's.
time here?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Hello, sir.
I've seen
What's
you
your
once.
name?
Yeah.
So
The question is, like you guys said, as far as opening the brewery and stuff, like 3.14, 3.48, as far as
1.15.
how scared were you,
Yeah.
to open the place? But, you guys are from Oklahoma. You obviously went to school on the West Coast. What on God's earth caused you guys to come up to, like, not Madison or Milwaukee, Northeast Wisconsin?
That'd be my fault.
And we're glad you guys have. We love you. But, I mean, that had to be a scarier moment moving everybody up here or, your hopes and dreams to Northeast Wisconsin. So, yeah, how did that whole story take place?
So, Bobby and I finished our PhDs in 2012. Me in chemistry, him in physics. He went off to brew school. And at that point, my father passed away. And about a week, I don't even remember, after we defended our dissertations. And so I moved home with my mother to take care of her and just help her get things in order and such. He had stage 4 lung cancer, and it was pretty fast from diagnosis to death. And with the inheritance that I got, I had a chunk of money, and I needed a job, but I wanted to be a professor at a small school so I could really get to know students, not the big school where you teach like hundreds and hundreds of students. And so I was on the job market. And I had some opportunities to possibly go to Australia or some other places to do what's called a postdoctoral position, to where after you finish your PhD, you go and like play science a lot longer. And Bobby was in beer school at the time at UC Davis, and I needed a job, and I was like, crap, they're not hiring right now. So Lawrence had a visiting assistant professor position for a 2-year position, and they needed what's called a physical chemist. I do the physics of chemistry, and I was like, that's me, cool, it's in Wisconsin, whatever, 2-year job, I'll take it. And on my interview, they were like, would you like a tenure line position? And I'm like, okay, which is basically it's when you get tenure line position, you're either hired for life or you're fired after a probationary period. And I was like, yes. However, on my job interview, they legally can't ask you, do you have a spouse and what do they do? They have to say, is there anything about Appleton you would like to know more about? For any reason. And I said, what's the brewery scene like? And they're like, okay. And I said, no, seriously, what's the brewery scene? So they took me to dinner at Stone Arch, and one of the guys that was there, he was on our search committee, and he was like, this is what this beer is, and I'm going to tell you how smart I am about beer. And he was completely wrong, and I called him out like right then. And one of the other faculty members was like, hire her right now. She's amazing. Then I had another faculty member take me up to Green Bay, and we went brewery hopping on my interview because I needed to like check out the competition. They had no idea what I wanted to do. But then I accepted the position, and I called Bobby. And you always tell the story that I was like, do they drink beer in Wisconsin? I knew they drank beer in Wisconsin.
Wait, you seriously said that?
He tries to make the story funnier, but
have you ever seen a map of the highest rates of beer drinking in the country? This is ground zero.
Yes.
No shit.
So, if terrorists wanted to attack beer drinkers, they would hit the AAL building.
No, he says I say this, though.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I was like, dude, we have the gold mine possibility. And what was really funny is Appleton Beer Factory wasn't, so I accepted the position, and Appleton Beer Factory wasn't quite done, so we emailed them, and they just kept emailing back, and they're like, we're sorry, we're not interested in talking to you. And now we've become the dearest friends with them. And they're like, you seriously, didn't Ben go back, and the owner of ABF, go back and look at his email?
One of us shared the original email that we sent, yeah.
They were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Recently, yeah.
Anyway, long story short, we wanted a university / place to build a brewery for a community that we absolutely know needed it, that we would love, and Appleton embraced us, and we could not be more happy than to have built something that Appleton has just told us what it needed, and that's what we've built.
And the winters didn't scare us away. So
no,
here we are.
Our first winter was 2013.
It was
Polar
a brutal
Vortex
winter
year.
in 2013.
We thought that was normal. All of y'all were like freaking out. We're like, this is what winter must be like. So we've been acclimated like as soon as we got here.
Any other questions? Come on.
Gary's always got questions.
The future. You got this place doing reasonably well. We're all here. We're all enjoying the beer. You got a bunch of regulars, people coming in. Where does McFleshman's go in the next 5 years?
We throw a lot of darts
We
at the
do.
wall.
This
You
is
could say
the
that.
eye of like, what can we disclose?
Oh, boy.
No, I think a lot of the brewing industry is moving towards rather than work to build a distribution company to where you sell beer for in the grocery store or whatever. It just has
Anyone that's watching the news maybe have seen the number of craft breweries go from 2,000 to 10,000 in the time since we opened. So
give
that
me a
gives you-
unit with those numbers.
Oh, so in the last 8 years.
like 10,000 what?
Oh, sorry. Number of breweries. Yeah.
Right.
Have gone from 2,000 to 10,000. So that means more competition for the shelf space.
Yes.
I mean, I just want to
You
give them
just
some
derailed me with what I was
quantitative.
going to
I'm
say.
sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, shush.
Should I take over or start over?
Never take over from me, my friend.
Next question, Gary.
No, so breweries are moving towards becoming destinations. So we make more money when you buy the beer directly from us. It helps us support our staff more. When you buy it from, like, say, Festival or Woodman's, that's helpful, but it costs a lot to work with the distributors. And this is true with any company. Like, if you buy something directly from the store across the street from you, they get more money than if you buy something from far away and they have to send it and ship it and all that. And so if people can buy beer directly from us, we fare better. And so multiple tap rooms are kind of what most breweries are moving towards. And so we've been on the market for looking for McFleshman's too for several years now. We've looked at Fond du Lac, we've looked at Manitowoc, we've looked at Green Bay.
Madison,
Milwaukee.
Goes on and on.
Not close enough that you don't know which one to choose from, but just far away that it doesn't make much sense to come directly here. You'd rather go to another
Also, when
space.
you get a chance to give your elevator pitch on what's your business about, I always say that we sell two things, and that's beer and conversation. You listen to the people downstairs. We built this tap room, and we're so fixated on beer. So whatever we do will probably be...
And no TVs.
...centered on, that one-on-one communication and community. Yep.
One of the interesting things about this place is that while you may, on a rare occasion, bring in a beer from another brewery, you do a swap, everything here is brewed in-house. You currently have around, 20 beers on
29
tap.
now. I think we're at 29.
And that is very different than most places, where you have a very wide diversity of beers that you're brewing. A lot of places will just have a couple beers that they focus on. They just crank those out all the time.
And we have a fair number of those, but yeah.
And there's always, every week I come here, there's something new on the menu. So is this something that you're going to kind of continue? Like it's
fun to be where we are, at least where I am now. I'm starting to see us. I'm trying to be have a bird's eye, watching us evolve as a company, and we now have an identity. That's really a fun thing to see come to fruition. We know which brands we have to keep on, and we know that we live in an industry that we have to keep innovating within. So I think that you'll see more of the same, but we're also solidifying who we are. We know our brand calendar better than we've ever known it. I'm a masochist. I'm never going to stop tinkering.
I notice I'm like keenly watching him for when I can just interrupt, which I just did. So go team, yay! I think the other thing is that we've got a smaller system than a lot of breweries. So our system is a 7 hectoliter. Translate.
10 hec, so it's about 8.5 barrel.
8.5 barrel.
We
whatever.
double batch into that, so it's 7.
That'd be a hogshead, a butt.
Yeah, there we go.
Something like that.
So anyway, we don't. It's
Like
not
three-
the big system, so we can actually like brew multiple beers. It's like if we had a real big system, we could only brew like one, and then we wouldn't have anywhere to put more beer. So the fact that we have multiple tanks is really helpful, and that's one of the ways that we want to expand is to buy more tanks.
So I want to close with one thing. I think we're pretty much close to time.
Oh.
Sure. You can ask a question, then I'm going to...
I'm just curious, and I'm really out of the beer scene, so I could have this wrong, but one thing I feel like is missing from Appleton is there's not a brewery brewing THC type drinks. Have you guys looked at that?
We have it on now.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually have.
All right.
We're,
like I said,
and we're ramping up for dry January. So we're treating that as California Sober Month. So we'll be seeing a lot of non-alcoholic beers, not just hop waters and sparkling waters. This is hot off the press. I'm thinking about doing a non-alcoholic, and maybe this is the craziest juxtaposition, THC-infused Oktoberfest for next fall. How stupid would that be? But we'll see where we live next fall.
So the question I want to end with is that if any of you go downstairs right now and you look behind the bar, you will see this wonderful, I assume, brass faucet with 2 lines coming off. And the reason I ask is because I was here the day it arrived, and Bobby was so happy. Explain what this is, because if you don't know any better, you're going to go downstairs and you see, yeah, they pour beer from it, whatever. But this is actually something special. Explain what it is and its relevance.
It is Lucre faucet.
The Lucre, L-U-K-R.
The Lucre.
It's a quest for the perfect foam.
Stop. You're just...
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Take
I'm
it.
so much better than you are. So imagine that you have traveled near and far, and you're like, I just want to understand what true bliss is in terms of a Czech Pilsner. We bought something as fancy could be, fancy spigot thing number 1, and fancy spigot thing number 2.
It's like a Dr. Seuss book in a way. Okay, spigot 1, spigot 2. Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, patented technology, what it can do is it can give you the most ultimate foam experience. And I have never experienced foam like this thing can offer. And it's called milk foam, which
Mliko,
is Mliko is wet foam.
Just go down and ask for a 5-ounce Mliko to understand
amazing.
it. Yeah.
Anyway, so this comes from the Czech Republic. I called the guys directly and I was like, "Can you build me this thing?" They're like, "Yeah, this is how you do it." And it's a very fancy faucet, kind of like when you have our public house pint, which I would hold that's the remnants of a public house pint. And it's a gorgeous black Irish stout with the perfect foam because it's a nitro tap and all that. You won't get the same experience as if you pour it from a CO2 tap. The Lucre faucet is designed for Czech Pilsners. And you can get our Hildy Pilsner as well as our Pirates Cove Helles Lager on the Lucre faucet.
Soon to be Schwarzbier.
It's also fancy gold and it has a little hop cone on the top.
Which is a great weapon if the bar fight breaks out. That hop cone is
Oh my
about
God,
2
the bar
pounds.
fight.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a bar fight here?
God, we had nightmares because that back bar.
Yeah. Shush. Well, yeah. But no. So Bobby overbuilt the bar downstairs.
Oh,
like the middle wall thing. We took out a section of the middle wall thing. We call it the what do we call it? The thing in the middle.
The half wall.
Half wall.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Bobby, he built the thing out of like steel beams, and
lot
it's like an
of
X thing,
steel.
and we're like, why? This kind of overbuilt.
And
He's
I
like,
said, God help the guy.
he says, we need to overbuild it because in case there's a bar fight. And I was like, what the hell is wrong?
So is there like a sawed-off shotgun like they have in the Old West saloons in the back?
Well, and then what's funny is he had to cut the thing in half, and he was like, who the hell built this
So I ended
Molson
up
straw?
Cutting it and making an opening.
And we were
I
like,
paid
it's
for
Bobby's
it.
bar
Yeah.
fight. We give each other so much shit. It's ridiculous.
All right, then that will conclude this episode of Respecting the Beer. Make sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast player, and you can follow it on Facebook or Patreon, where you can support the show. And until next time, please remember to respect the beer.
Woo! Go team.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming to tonight's event. Let's give a round of applause for all of our podcasters one more time. And all of these podcasters are actually a part of the Appleton Podcast Co-op. We are an organization that tries to teach people how to podcast and just brings local podcasters together so that we can help each other grow our shows. So if you want to become a member and start a podcast of your own, scan this QR code right now. Anyways, we'll see you next time. We're going to be doing some more of these events next year. So thanks for coming tonight. Y'all have a great rest of your night.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.